Hi, my name is Linnar Viik. I presume you all know a little bit about Estonia and also digital achievements of Estonia, of the present and the nearby future. I'm really bad on tracing back to the history. I'm rather good on remembering the future, not the past. But I would like today to share with you a couple of my memories, what took Estonia to the digital transformation stage where we are right now. I would like to start with looking back to the pre-independent Estonian era. During the 1950s, in Soviet Union, the Academy of Sciences was not a scientific umbrella organization, but it was an extension of the political agenda of the Communist Party. It meant also that majority, if not all, the university and research facilities were dictated de facto and de jure also by agenda of the Academy of Sciences of Soviet Union, but it was inclined towards the agenda of the Communist Party. And one area which of course during the 1950s started to raise was a race for the battlefield in space. We took the Sputnik to the orbit, and that caused a lot of tension around the world. And not only the mad scientists like Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, but also other interdisciplinary scientists started to emerge. And one area which was hot topic for the interdisciplinary research for the computer sciences. However, it was also decided that very much around that time that the regions in western part of the Soviet Union, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, were not so much focused or should not focus so much on political sciences or social sciences or broader humanitarian sciences, but rather on the applied engineering sciences, interdisciplinary research and also real sciences. Liia, can you remember when was started the observatory near Tõravere associated with Tartu University? 62. Yes. So it was late 50s, early 60s when major decisions around the research were made. And that also meant computer sciences beginning in Estonia. Institute of Cybernetics, which was interdisciplinary research institute, Institute of Applied Biology and Chemical Physics, also very close to that. And the computers, mainframe computers, which were actually copies of the IBM mainframes called Ural and Minsk, were brought to Estonia, to Tartu University, and pretty much, if you can imagine, the gym hall was full of one computer, and this was a place where the computer science history started in Estonia. So if we look forward to early 1990s, then by the time we regained our independence, Estonia, but also to a certain degree Latvia, which was very strong in radio wave communications and radio wave research, Lithuania, very strong in laser research and applied engineering around the laser technologies, which is also actually a wave technology, but very, very narrow band wave technology. We all had academic generations, already 2-3 academic generations, which were focused on the topics dedicated to engineering and computer sciences. So we could say that we were transforming very quickly, despite the fact that I recall very well that in early and mid 1980s, the computers were already in the organizations. Estonian TV had, Estonian radio had a computing center. Estonian construction ministry, Ministry for Construction, Ministry for Economy, they all had computers. The task given to computers was nonsense and meaningless, but the experience gained to use computing systems was there. So let me move forward to the early 1990s and the time when Estonia regained the independence. And let me bring in the kind of starting point when kind of well-known story already, our Prime Minister giving an oath in front of the Parliament. At that time, Prime Minister's office was in Toompea Castle, where the Parliament is residing, and Prime Minister's office was actually in the same rooms where right now the Speaker of the Parliament is having his rooms. And that is front to the Toompea Square, in front of the Orthodox Church, and State Secretary and Prime Minister's Secretary's office was lining up. Congratulations, Mr. Prime Minister, welcome to your new office and everything. And the office was nice and great view to the square, and Prime Minister said, wow, nice office, and now this is your room, the next one is your room. And there was a big, huge table, like from the old kolkhoz director's office. Dark brown, the colors were really dark, the carpet was really dark, and Prime Minister said, wow, big room, and there were 8 phones on the table of the Prime Minister. And when he asked, and only 3 of them had a dial. And when he asked, wow, so many phones, why are they here? Then the secretary said that, well, Mr. Prime Minister, we don't know, they were here, those phones, when we got to the power. When we regained our independence, the phones were here, and well, we don't know actually where they are connected to. When the Prime Minister asked, when the red phone without the dial starts ringing, and who is calling, we actually don't know. Rather pick up than we know where it's connected to. So we inherited total chaos and mess in terms of telecommunication infrastructure. Just to move a little bit, so back in the history, during Soviet Union times, there were parallel infrastructures for trade unions, for Communist Party, for military police. Railway had a separate communication network, fixed copper infrastructure, and so on and so on. And one of the first things we actually did was to rely on our good Nordic neighbors in Tallinn. The telecommunication, or the first mobile telecommunication networks from the Scandinavia, the analog mobile telephony called NMT, Nordic Mobile Telephony Standard, which was an analog communication protocol for mobile phones, which is actually an earlier, a failed military communication protocol for the Finnish and Swedish armies, caused a number of suicides by the high-ranked generals in 1960s in Finland and Sweden, and later on transferred into a civil use with a great success, was having a range which covered also parts of Tallinn. So our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, our President Office, our Prime Minister's Office had 5-6 kilos weighting mobile phones, which were actually subscriptions to the Finnish network. And that was our connection with the rest of the world. Before that, early or the late 1980s and early 1990s, the first satellite internet connections were opened from Estonia. One in Tallinn, not far from here in the Institute of Applied Chemistry and Biotechnology, and another in Tartu, were opened up, and they served actually as a means for alternative communication in case media and fixed telecommunication networks would have been taken down. So the only alternative communication channels outside from Estonia to the rest of the world were couple of mobile phones and 2 satellite internet uplink connections, which at that time were used already to spread the information in the space called Usenet and Fidonet, which were part of the internet services. When we're looking back to the key success story, comparing Estonia with some other countries, then the very quick privatization of a telecommunication monopoly and opening up and liberalizing the telecommunication services market was probably the key factor. We were lucky not to have a significant struggle with investors. Let's remind, at that time it was a government-owned, state-owned, monopolistic operators in Finland and Sweden who co-invested on equal basis to Estonian National Telecommunication Company and started to build up the international communications, mostly for the fixed telephony services. Later on, also for the broadband data services and mobile telephony services. The concession agreement which Estonian government signed with that private investors pool was focusing on one area, which is international fixed line telephony calls, not data and not mobile. And comparing us to Latvia or Lithuania or some other countries, we succeeded only not with the regulatory environment, but also with investor relations. We never went to court with our investors as compared to our neighboring countries. And we were successful also on engaging other telecommunication investors from Finland and from Sweden, respectively then Radiolinja, which is now known in Estonia as an Elisa, and then Comvik and Netcom, now known as Tele2. Plus, in addition to that, by 1994, we had already private companies, around 20 ISPs, small-scale internet service providers who mostly had a dial-up or some also a limited leased line of fixed broadband services of that time. 1994 was also the first time when in Estonia some sort of quasi-political development strategy or vision around the concept of information society was written. We had, let's remind, in European Union, which existed already at that time, was a German politician, Bangemann, whose Bangemann's report from 1993-1994 established a framework towards an information society. The similar topics raised also in the United States and in some other countries, and they focused mostly on the infrastructure shortcomings and the market failures on delivering new generation of telecommunication infrastructure. And Eesti tee infoühiskonda, Estonian roadmap towards information society, was non-political, non-government, non-parliament framework, white paper document, which was written by group of academics and engineers and private sector representatives. The well-known computer scientist at that time, Ustus Agur, was a chief editor and initiator of that process, but that served as a first kind of policy framework document, which at that time started already to play, in a sense, a critical role. And now we can ask that the first question, when looking back, then Estonia is distinguished or is very remarkable by having the fastest information society development with smallest investment per capita on ICT. So the technology is the same around the world. The goals for the information society are the same. And the size often is not the key factor when we're talking about technology investments. The core components of the information systems, costs, say the customs systems or the border guard systems, core components cost the same for Austria or for Germany or France compared to Estonia. But the investment per capita was the smallest compared to other European or OECD countries right now. And the growth path, the usage, the output indicators were the fastest and highest. The first 10 years, I would describe Estonian information society development as not strategy-driven development. We did not have a strategy, saying that we have a strategic vision and we start moving to implement that strategy with our development activities. It was rather opposite. We had an external opportunities. PC architecture compared to mainframe architecture, Internet TCP/IP protocol compared to X250, X500 protocols, the proprietary ones. We started to have an kind of rather liberal approach to copyright issues in the early phase, so we re-engineered a lot of software for the appropriate use and started also to use the first levels of the open source software in the very early phases. And those were external developments that we were using on a basis as they appeared. So the new technology came, the new opportunity arose, we started to use, and we saw that this is driving us towards a new kind of strategic paradigm. Strategies were started only later. The first principles of Estonian Information Society were adopted by Parliament in 1998 only. And by that time a lot of things happened. Let's jump ahead a little bit. 1996 actually is a good time, because when we are comparing the foreign direct investments which came to Estonia compared to many other post-Soviet regions, then of course it started by privatization. Privatization was a key factor, and that meant that majority of investments came to the industrial sector. But the strong second was telecommunication foreign direct investments. Then the third was retail. The retail became even bigger during 1996, 1997, and in 1998, once again, the telecommunication became a huge one. And then, of course, the banks came. The Scandinavian banks with post-Russian and post-market crash in 1997 came to Estonia, purchased majority of the commercial bank's assets, became a major shareholder. So the Hansabank became a Swedbank, and Ühispank became an SEB bank, and also the same applied with other banks. And foreign direct investments were dominated by financial sector investments. But still the telecommunications remained always a solid part. At least 10% of all foreign direct investments went to telecommunication sector. That is something, the figure, which is uncomparable to some other countries. 2-3%, so 3 to 5 times less went to telecoms in other countries. In Estonia there was a market competition and telcos were motivated to invest. In 1996 you must know, Estonians have one religion dedicated to education. We are religious about education. We are believers that education gives our children a better opportunity and better life. And in 1996, the debate in society about reforming the education, not only from the perspective of the network of the schools, the ownership of the schools, but also about the substance, was raising. And the discussion led us towards an idea that by the end of millennium, all Estonian children, what are the 2 key skills every children who are right now at schools, what should they have as a new skills compared to the present school agenda and the curriculum, what they should have? And there were 2 skills which were flourishing as an idea. One is everybody should speak English, and second, everybody should have a computer and internet skills. And that was the beginning of the Tiger Leap Foundation. At that time, the present rector of Tallinn Technical University, Jaak Aaviksoo, was a minister for the education. And he, at that time, surprisingly for many people, came out with an understanding that Tiger Leap should not be a government initiative, that any innovation that is coming from the government will die faster than we can say Tiger Leap, and they will just fail faster and fail bigger when it's coordinated by government. He came out with a notion that that should be a private-public partnership where government is one of the co-founders of the non-profit foundation, and the private companies, civil society and private individuals, everybody can join to the creation of the Tiger Leap Foundation. So in 1997, it took 1 good year plus almost after the decision to create the Tiger Leap Foundation was made to the actual founding. It was late February 1997, when in Tallinn National Library the Tiger Leap Foundation's founding meeting took place. And the goal for the Tiger Leap Foundation was not actually to deal with the teachers and with a curriculum, but the primary goal was to deliver internet connectivity and computers to all schools by end of the century. So by year 2000, all schools should have an access to internet, and all children in the schools should have an access to computers connected to internet. Teachers teaching and the curriculum development was rather hot still in the rhetorics, but actually it was school children themselves who knew faster how to use computers, and they were rather teaching teachers how to use, and also they were the administrators of the network, also doing a lot of chaos and mess at that time, because the gaming industry started to boom and it was a lot of fun. Most important, children were a lot of time at school at that time. So Tiger Leap Foundation's primary goal was to deliver connectivity, and by year 2000 that task really was done, and now, as we know, Tiger Leap Foundation does not exist any longer, but it was merged later on with an educational IT foundation, Hariduse Infotehnoloogia Sihtasutus, which the initiative is part of. But let's move a bit ahead. 1 year, the foreign direct investments. When we speak usually the capital inflows, we talk about sectors where they go and the amount. But it's also to note once again that foreign direct investments or the capital has also not a nationality, but it has a culture. And foreign direct investments, especially on a small and medium-sized companies level in Estonia, mostly coming from Finland and Sweden. By mid-1990s, Finnish and Swedish small and medium-sized companies were rather computer literate. They used, at least to a certain degree, for basic management functions, the computer software. Spreadsheet solutions, Lotus 123 was in use, and many other computer softwares you don't know any longer nowadays. So the investments from Finland and Sweden included always a small, but always a component of IT. Even a Petri pizza type of pizzeria was having a cash registry and was having a small computer, PC, where the reporting was made, where the salaries, where the accounting was made. And that makes already a cultural difference within the organization. If your company is using computers, it's not an IT company once again, it's a regular retail shop or wholesale or the construction or consultancy or pizzeria or cafe or brewery, and you are using computers, it makes a cultural difference for the people who are working in that organization. And that moment also, there was a deal which banks in Estonia made with majority of big employees, but then also to the smaller employees level. Banks always hate cash. Actually, the employees or employers also hate cash, because that was a messy exercise, especially in the quasi-wild West dates in Estonia, where we still had cash robberies taking place. Banks made a deal to companies. You can have your bank account and transactions free of charge if you force all your workers, all your contract workers, to open a bank account, and we are motivating the workers by giving them a free ATM card to get the cash if they want. So it was a deal between the banks and companies to force also individual users into banking. And 1997 is an interesting date, because Estonian banks started to use data-based or data communication-based banking solutions already starting from 1993. Telehansa was pre-internet protocol type of banking application for corporates. In 1997, we had still a lot of banks in Estonia. Banking was kind of everybody made a bank. And that was Lääne-Eesti, Commerzbank, and all kinds of. We had over 40-50 banks in Estonia, and the pre-crisis consolidation has not taken place yet. And in Estonia, we had 4 banks providing an internet banking. And let's put it to the global picture. In 1997, globally, 23 banks worldwide had an internet banking. Out of them, 4 were in Estonia. Forex Bank, Rae Bank, which don't exist any longer, Ühispank and Hansabank. And that was not a top management driven process, but it was bottom-up approach where IT enthusiasts working in the banks were the ones who said that, well, since we are using internet protocol for our internal communication between the branches, we could open up the same system actually for the end users with some very simple authentication tools, and it started to boom. In 1998, a year later, Estonian tax department gave a first time opportunity for people to file taxes over internet. And yeah, you might ask how you authenticate, because you know, our first ID card was issued only 5 years later. Estonian government started to trust authentication tools used by commercial banks. So if you wanted to declare your taxes to tax department, you had to log into your internet bank with your credentials from the internet bank, and then push a button, go to tax department, and then it rerouted you to the tax department with trust credentials, and government accepted actually the digital authentication level which banks were using already at that time. So very interesting approach, and if we're talking that ID card is absolutely a cornerstone of any type of government services provided digitally. No, we used good 5 years before the ID card appeared to the market, the bank solutions. And actually we do it even right now. You can even right now log into the bank or go to the different public services, and there is an opportunity to log in with your smart ID and with your ID card or mobile ID, or with a different bank trust services. In 1997, the telecommunication infrastructure was there. Mobile telephony companies had already earned market shares. We had the first attempts to move to the digital GSM networks, which were also, we still had a parallel analog and digital mobile telephony networks. We had the first mobile data service providers, and we still had a less than 10% of society using internet. Then we had a different initiative, the same 1997, together with non-government investors, private investors, international donors, the very different concept was developed. Well, nothing new today, well, kind of internet cafes and all kinds of places we have, but we had a thing called public internet access point. The first one was opened in the Tallinn National Library, the next ones were in Hiiumaa Island, then in Võru city, and then it started to spread. And the bottom line was that there needs to be a public place where everybody can access free of charge computer which is connected to internet with a guidance, with some sort of guidance. There is no computer teacher present, but somebody who knows a little bit or has been using, helping you to surf around, helping you to find the places you want, helping you to go through the basic uses. And voila, we had also an internet traffic sign created, which you can probably, maybe you have seen even nowadays, there are some places next to the road, signs like internet. This is really like a good old heritage, which when you have mobile all around the country nowadays, you don't really think that there was a time. Very quickly, within a 2 years' time, we had from 1, 2, 3, 4, we had 250, somewhere around 300 public internet access points. And that meant a lot for people to use internet and that time when they wanted to use it. This is an historic internet penetration within the society with the two international organizations sponsoring. Estonia was the first country starting from 1996 to measure with an omnibus research on a regular basis internet penetration. It was followed the same TNS EMOR who it was just EMOR at that time. We developed together a methodology to ask people, do you know what is internet? And if you know what is internet, then do you use the internet and so on? How often do you use internet? Why do you, for what purposes you are using? And you can see the growth rate of Estonian internet, and we surpassed in 1999 the EU average, and EU average started to move like that, and that was really the peak, 1998, 1999, and the huge jump is caused by also total non-governmental initiative. Let's remind once again, 1998 was the first time when Estonian Parliament adopted the principles of Estonian Information Society, and among that principle it was also stated that the action plan for Information Society needs to be renewed on a yearly basis. Every year, new action plan, which covers all the institutions. It was stated that the regulatory environment is a key factor. Stimulation for the private ICT sector is a second strong pillar, and it was already stated at that time that the public digital services development should become also the key, the strategic goal for all the public institutions. In 1998, we still had no political coordination on a broader sense. Yes, we had an informatics board, Informatika Nõukogu, which was gathered by state secretary. Once again, state secretary in Estonia is a non-political civil servant working to support Prime Minister's office and Estonian government on a daily regular bureaucratic and public administrative functions. So it was civil servant whose under whom the board was gathered. It was private, public, mostly academics, representatives, and it had no enforcement power. It had only recommendation power, and even a state secretary often did not know what to do with those recommendations because he has a limits as a civil servant. Now, that jump here was caused by a very funny initiative which was starting in 1998, and I don't know, have you ever heard about a thing called Tigrituur? That was a crazy idea to make all Estonian major cities during 1 week in August, to pack the computers to the big trucks. You see what the computers looked at that time. Yeah, this is a computer and this is a monitor. So in every city, day after day, the tour took place, and the idea was very simple. You open up by 10 o'clock, at 10 o'clock in the morning, in the city square of Paide or city square of Haapsalu or Viljandi. Everybody can have an access to computers, everybody has lectures all the day, and we also had at that moment a free email. This is Lennart Meri speaking over ISDN. ISDN video protocol, and there were lectures, and in 1999 we had a free email service which started already in 1998 called mail.ee, free for everybody, and mailbox with some size, and then also later on the web-based. It was, by the way, it was just before Hotmail started to emerge around the world. So we had a free email service for everybody. And when we're looking to the peak in 1999 for the internet users, it was caused by 1 week tour in Estonia, where during 1 week time, around 150,000 people in Estonia signed up first time in their life for email and had a first email address free of charge. And that server crashed every second week because there were so many subscribers coming up and up and up. Anyway, there were children's and video and education and for the parents and general lectures and so on and so on. Yeah, the time was measured, how many minutes everybody was able to use. And then there was also examination, and so day after day, and it was also it was entirely private initiative, no single penny from the government except the city or municipality accepting that they are giving you a free of charge a city square to hold the event, and a lot of fun. And that was followed later on the Tigri tour with a totally private initiative called Vaata Maailma, Look at World Foundation, which was private initiative by telecommunication companies and banks and software and IT companies to boost further the internet use in society. And they carried out not the city square type of training, but the classroom training free of charge for the blue collars, for people who at their job at that time in 2000 and 2001, for people who don't use IT at their job, are already outside of the education system, but they most probably will be using IT in the future, or then be uncompetitive in the employment market position. We carried out within 2 years' time the trainings for 20% of Estonian employment market free of charge. So 20% of people on the employment market don't have computer skills at all, and then after 3 months' time, after 6 months' time, they have a new skill to use computer. In 1999, we had quite a number of dilemmas. We had a strong raising pressure towards the public administration on using IT. Virtually at that time there were no typewriters. All the documents were prepared on computer. But the document sharing was sometimes still on the good old floppy disks or burned CDs. And the connectivity for public administration was also rather weak. So we started with an initiative which was called Peatee. Peatee was kind of the main road. Peatee was a core connectivity infrastructure to connect the major ministries and major databases to the internet. And second was also in the same time, central government already started to give a lot of tasks and responsibilities to municipalities. But municipalities did not afford to build up their internet connectivity capacity. So in addition to that, we had an initiative called Külatee, which was a village road, main road, village road, and village road was about to build and bring all the Estonian municipalities and all the local libraries online with a fixed broadband connectivity. Those two initiatives laid the groundwork to the data sharing and access to the databases in between the government institutions. It also caused problems because once again, the IT market was not too well established. Yes, we had a number of hardware sales companies, but majority of the competence in the software development was deployed by commercial banks and bigger industrial companies. Hansabank's IT department and Hansabank's IT department annual budget was bigger than Estonian government total IT spending in 1998, in 1999. And they had a staff of over 400 people working already in the IT department, while Estonian government employed competence of somewhere around 150, 160 people. So we had a lot of subcontracting taking place on the market. And some of the subcontracting, as always, when you just meet a hacker who says, yes, I can make your database better, we failed in a big way with one hacker called Imre Perli, who was a college dropout, convicted crook, drug dealer, hacker, name a thing, gun dealer. He was a couple of times arrested, not by having narcotics, but he had the components in the car to make amphetamine and methamphetamine, and well, he had a vision, and yeah, and one of his visions he implemented was to create an Imre Perli database, which he was super successful. He was subcontracted by police department, he was subcontracted by population registry, and he also had hacker contacts in telecommunication companies. He created a super database. That super database was available on the black market on CD. You insert it, you type your name, somebody's name, and you see the addresses, cars, company stuff. Well, of course, it was not dynamic, but it was at that time, it was kind of a big shock. Who leaked in it, what happened, and then when I was also at that time advisor to Prime Minister, I remember we had government had a kind of Kaare Street in Nõmme, kind of residence building from old Estonian time when sometimes there were sauna evenings for IT people. And then we came out that we have a main road, we have a village road, let's have also a crossroad. Crossroad where all the databases meet and they will be securely interchanged. It's a middleware, not software, not hardware, but middleware or middleware application which requires a strong authentication, strong encryption, and that will solve also the problem with a data exchange, because at that time every institution was building up a bilateral data exchange agreements with other institutions. And if you are thinking about how many complexities you have, then it's growing up in a logarithmic scale when you are going to exchange with data on bilateral agreements with other institutions. And that was approved by politicians without understanding what it means. And that was actually the beginning of X-Road. It was in the middle of the budget year. We reshuffled a little bit of the budgets for the different ministries. Well, the Ministry of Culture had a head of IT who set up Planet Earth's biggest Doom server park in the cellars of the ministry in Suur-Karja Street, instead of creating something valuable for the Estonian society. And it was at peak times, 60% of the Doom players on the planet Earth were residing inside the servers, and that IT CIO of the ministry was quickly fired. The remaining budget for the year was taken away from the Ministry of Culture and given to X-Road development. Very simple solution. Well, yeah. Well, everybody, and that was a big international scandal that kind of Doom servers disappeared overnight, and Doom players around the world were really disappointed by decision of a God knows why they can't play any longer in Estonia. Okay, so that was a background of the X-Road. It was a must, it was a cost exercise we had to face because of the complexity of the data exchange on the bilateral basis. And we had already an existing infrastructure and capacity to implement it. Year 2000, Prime Minister was moving to the new premises, and that gave an opportunity to rethink how the government is working. Everybody in the government was working on computers. All the data was prepared on computers, but in average for every cabinet meeting, the 40 kilos of paper was wasted. So it was decided, also once again in the middle of the budget year, in late May, that by August, it was late May, and in August the government and Prime Minister is moving to the new premises in Stenbock House. And I said that there could be an idea that we work without papers. Prime Minister said, very good, let's do it. I went to State Secretary saying that, well, do we have potentially money for that? He said, of course, no. Let's plan for the next kind of 3 years budgetary planning process. And I said, but what about the money you're using for copying the papers? And he said, well, I have still remaining some 600,000 Estonian kroons for copying the papers. And I said, stop copying the papers, give money to me. And I went with that money to the IT companies. Summer vacations were starting, and I said, we have a crazy idea. Let's do a paperless cabinet meeting room for the government. And they asked, what is who else is doing that? We said, nobody. And they said, fine, let's start doing it. And that was an agenda for one meeting, cabinet meeting. And it was actually implemented, and we planned 45 minutes. Well, you recognize number of the people from the screen, the Prime Minister at that time, and he still, oh, so many people. He was just kicked off from the Eesti Lotto, and Aino Lepik, I think, went to the new, she's now ambassador in Portugal and was former State Secretary, and so on and so on. Anyway, we planned 45 minutes training per minister. It took only 10 minutes, and then they understood what is the business about. And at that screen, I think you still see the, they are wireless mouses and wireless keyboards. And because of Ivari Padar, there was a question, why do the mouses in Estonian cabinet meeting room have tails? Why we have wired mouses? It was because of Ivari Padar. He had a habit on every time, well, he's sitting down, when he's standing up and leaving, he takes the pencils and stuff and puts it in the pocket and leaves. Now, every time after cabinet meeting we had a problem that one mouse was missing. And then we put the tails to the mouses, and also we had Signe Kivi and Toivo Asmer sitting next to each other. One is left-handed, and suddenly in the middle of the cabinet meeting room, Signe starts to cry, my computer went mad, my computer went mad. Actually, it was Toivo Asmer using he or her computer's mouse. And Toivo Asmer says, my computer does not work at all. So it was also a lot of fun. We were afraid, couple of things. We were afraid that we are losing debate in the cabinet meetings. It did not happen, rather the debate went even further. And secondly, we also saved a lot of time, and the idea was to build a bridge between society and the cabinet. The idea was very simple. Agenda for the cabinet meeting was visible to everybody online 1 week before the meeting, and when the decisions are made in the cabinet. The moment the decision is made, the decision is also public on the internet. So you don't need to wait for the Riigi Teataja or the cabinet press conference to know what was taking place. Everything is online immediately. Let's jump ahead. 2001, first time we started to have a different level of approach to the ICT. Do you recall who is that? Historic memories. He is the first Estonian IT minister responsible for IT and e-government. This is Toivo Jürgenson. Yeah, Toivo Jürgenson. It was an accident. It was as often political decisions take place, they took place in within the unknown factors, and it was very suddenly decided, totally surprising to everybody, that Ministry of Roads and Communication should also take a responsibility for IT. At that time, the Minister of Economy was separate, then they were merged, economy, roads, transportation and IT, and Toivo was a minister for that. He had a hard time because then also the informatics board and all the decision making and policy making became government issues, which also meant when the politician is bringing topic up, it gets to the political debate and political fight. So far, all the IT-related matters were supported by all political parties, and the Estonian government's public expenditure was always, not big, but always roughly around 1% of the state budget went to IT in public administration. It was not too much, it was not too little, but it was steady financing. And then it started a little bit to fluctuate. And now 2002, the unique window of opportunity to come out with an ID card and digital identity infrastructure. And this was also when, this was actually a kind of last political maneuver by the Prime Minister at that time, Mart Laar, who made a number of political deals to convince the parties later on supporting strongly the ID card and the approach we have had. Most opposition was from the Reform Party at that time to the ID card, and mostly they were objecting the fact that the chip-based ID card is mandatory and people can't choose between the plain ID card and chip-based ID card. But everybody had a one type of ID card, which they thought it was too paternalistic from the government to implement this type of approach. However, here we are right now, and once again, by that time, when in January 2002, Arnold and Ingrid Rüütel were the first ones to get an Estonian ID card in their hands. We already had a good 5 years where people were declaring taxes, were using services online, and the Estonian approach can be described very much by still the development-driven strategy, not the strategic development processes. I think I would stop my kind of historic view here right now. We have always said that we have a couple of kind of cornerstones on which Estonian e-governance is standing. One is clearly the telecommunication infrastructure. We succeeded to deliver faster than others on more affordable level than many other countries. And we were the first country, not in words, but in practice, to deliver internet as a human right. What does it mean? In 1999, we made a change in law on telecommunication. And in telecommunication law, there are things called USOs. USO is an acronym meaning Universal Service Obligation. dominant market players, and dominant market player is a company with a market share over 25%. Dominant market players need to provide services which are under universal service obligation with the same price, accessibility and quality all around the licensed territory. And we added internet access to universal service obligation. Before that, there were two things or three things. There were phone booths. You know, phone booth is a box you can go in and use phone. You had telephone catalogs with the phone numbers, and you had a fixed local telephony calls, which were subject to universal service obligation. We agreed with telcos that we remove phone booths and phone books from universal service, and instead of that we bring in internet. They were of course a bit against it and blah blah blah, but that meant that if you go to Eesti Telefon and say I want internet in the middle of nowhere, they had to provide it as quickly and with the same price and same quality as they provide it in the central city of Tallinn. And that made them to innovate, to create a new level of radio links, to mesh up with mobile data to the countrysides. And that was good actually. Second cornerstone was trusted digital identity, which we always speak about. And trusted, there are a couple of things. Secure, trusted. Security is something which we don't understand what is secure. We believe that somebody, an authorized institution, specialist, has been carried out the audit and it has verified and came to us that this is secure enough for us right now. And that creates trust. So the trust levels in society in Estonia have always been mediated via experts and less via people with a lower trust level like politicians. That has been second keystone. And government, transparent, efficient e-government. So far in Estonia, the key components or leitmotif has been that the e-government saves money. Is more efficient, saves money. How many minutes per year we save when we sign digital document? How many hours we save when we make when we use car registry? So this is something which can be calculated into real time. And if we are looking to the economic theory, then our GDP consists of the man hours available to produce something, and also natural resources we're using. But majority of Estonian economic activities and economic growth is not relying on how many trees we sell or timber we sell, but how many man hours is available on the employment market. So if we can save 10 hours per month, it's 100 hours a year. It means already 60 million hours per year for the entire employment market. And that is as much as an organization with 120 people can do over a couple of years' time. So that was a very strong logic. Now, 2018, 2019 logic is not only to save the money, but also to help economy to scale and to grow. Government as an enabler for the growth enabler, not efficiency only. But those have been the cornerstones of Estonian e-governance. So 1 hour and 5 minutes and some 15 years of history dating back to 1950s already in some cases. Questions about that, what we spoke? Too much information needs absorbing. And now let me welcome you to Estonian E-Governance Academy. Who is first time here? Wow! Okay, now. This is Estonian E-Governance Academy, where you are right now. This is my colleague Liia, and I have also colleague Helen back there, and you can make a tour later on around our office. The Estonian E-Governance Academy was founded 15 years ago, now 16 years ago already. And the mission for the E-Governance Academy has been to help governments with their digital transformation aspirations. During the last 15 years, this is a map of activities for Estonian E-Governance Academy. We carry out trainings here, physically here. We carry out trainings online. We carry out trainings in the countries, and we carry out other consultancy and advisory activities. And I come in a second also to what is our portfolio right now. We started by having a primary focus in the first years to form a Soviet Union. And the reason was very simple. By year 2000, Estonia had developed to a certain level in information society. And other countries from the former Soviet Union were still there. So they wanted to know, what have we done differently? Because for Kazakhstan or for Armenia or for Georgia, Estonian experience was much more relevant than Austrian experience or American experience. They did not want to hear about Swedish experience in Georgia, but rather they were interested, what did Estonians do differently, because we were in the same shit 20 years ago and now they are there. And we started by former Soviet Union. It was moved further down to South Europe, to former Yugoslavia, to Serbia, Montenegro, Macedonia, and then other countries followed in Cape Verde, in African continent, in Asia, and then expanded a bit broader. We are non-profit foundation. I am one of the founders of this foundation. And now, 15 years later, I am back here also heading a program. We are not government organization, but and majority of our funding comes from different donors. It's not always that the developing country, or as we say, country in the rapid development or in rapid transition, can pay for the services or for training for the flights. It's other institutions who cover the costs. And if you see that the structure, how it's moving, we gain more and more money from our own entrepreneurial activities, as we might say, which means that our costs are covered by the working hours we spent somewhere on the country territory. Yes?
Where did in 2002 the first initial needs for E-Governance Academy come from?
It came two aspects. First of all, the international donors like World Bank and UNDP were under pressure in their country offices in Georgia, in Kazakhstan, by the government, saying that information society is very important. It was a time when just global summit for information society in Tunis and Geneva were over. All the countries declared a bright future information society declarations, but they did not have competence and tools in hands to move further. So it was demand driven, and donors were not capable of recognizing internal competencies for training or for advisory services. And they came and turned to Estonia as one example of the countries. So that was a starting point. So this is a structure of different activities in our portfolio, and we might say that the so-called e-services development is predominant in our service portfolio still, where we help governments around the world to develop their services. And our roadmap is actually very simple. It's with all the countries and governments, we start by asking where we are, where you are right now. We make a quick audit looking what is the current situation. Then we make it together a very pragmatic kind of Estonian type of pragmatic vision where we want to be. What is there we could achieve? Not in 20 years time, not in 50 years time, but in 3 to maximum 5 years time. With existing technological, with existing financial, and with existing competencies available for that particular country. So realistic roadmap. And then when we have made down the roadmap, we are looking and helping government to monitor how to get there. So that is where our biggest service part is. Another area of our activities is a national cybersecurity index. We have taken the cybersecurity very seriously and created a kind of self-assessment online tool for the governments to assess their capacity and readiness and shortcomings on cybersecurity area, which is right now covering 100 countries, the ranking, and it is interactive and enables you to see really what are your weaknesses and what are your strengths. This is separately available, and once again we on an annual basis over the last 4 years we have organized a global e-governance conference in Tallinn, which can be described as a kind of mandatory annual religious event for those who are converted already. It's a kind of visiting the Mecca, and they do it, and we do it on an annual basis. Every year we focus on a new hot and most important topic. Usually we have 70 plus government delegations. I think the biggest number of delegations, Helen, was 100 something. Yeah, 100 countries present. So we might say this is the most international event in the Scandinavian, kind of Northern European region, taking place every year with more governments present. Well, we don't have Olympic Games coming nearby in the Northern Europe, and Eurovision is much smaller in terms of the government's presence, but government delegations, in terms of number of government delegations, we are the biggest, most international event. And next year it will be back to back with Lennart Meri conference as usual. It will be with a Cycon conference, which will be followed after us, and we do it always together, kind of back to back with some other events taking place usually in end of May, and save the date for the next year. We are 30 plus core staff and somewhere around 120 associated experts in the different fields of activities, and our majority areas are related to training activities, smart governance activities, e-democracy activities, and smart cities activities, and our research and legal activities. So we are trying to cover, we never code. We are the ones who go to the country and establish a roadmap and framework for the government to move further. However, if there is a need to get more from Estonia, we are the ones who help also the Estonian companies to get into the long-term relationships with government, so that if we have finished or if we have finished our part and continue only on advisory services, then the implementation comes in from Cybernetica, from Nortal, from Positium, from Reachu, Regio, number of other companies who are right now on the field helping our government partner relations to move forward to other activities. There is one thing, if you go to our web, you can subscribe to the newsletter, which gives you also, when you are speaking about e-governance and digital transformation in Estonia, we share our visiting list, training list, our presence and biggest projects to everybody on a regular basis. So if you subscribe, you get at least some sort of feeling what we are doing and what is happening in the field of e-governance related to Estonia and us. Well, thank you. And you, questions?
Yes, I have a question regarding the budget.
Yes.
Do you have some kind of a base budget, or how is it?
No, we are entirely financed only by our activities. So yes, we have no experience to say that this year's budget will be somewhere around our revenues from the different activities will be probably somewhere around 5 million, 5.5 million euros. But this is based on the fact that we have some projects which are 2-3 years long projects. We have regular knowledge that Canadian government is coming back this fall also for long training, and then there will be a Malaysian government coming to a long training, and then so we know ahead a little bit our planning, and we know also what is happening in 2019, and we are quite booked already. My personal agenda is really, I know pretty much that in fall 2020 I can start lecturing at Tartu University on a bit higher capacity, but this year, next year are really already fully booked.
Okay.
Yes.
Question. Now that you've been to different parts of the world and then have different communication with governments, etc., what kind of region of the world, let's say, is most behind? Which one is perhaps most advanced? Like, is it Estonia, or it depends on the areas? And then the other one is, if these governments, they all kind of have a very specific goal in mind in terms of this information society, or they'll just come and say like, hey, we want to be like Estonia, or like, you know, what is it where we want to go? Do they know this?
The most difficult is with the countries and governments who come and say that I have heard that there is something phenomenal in Estonia. Bring to me same things. I want Estonian e-government now. And this is the worst thing that could happen to anybody, also to that country. Because if you want what is in Estonia, we started to make it, as you recognize today also from my presentation, we started to make it in the kind of early 1990s already, the many of the areas we are working. And I would never recommend to any country to kind of face back your ambitions to the architecture and concepts which were flourishing in mid-90s or late 90s, rather to start really from the ground. And technology is the same, but social, cultural, regulatory aspects are different in different countries. The most dynamic region right now is Southeast Asia and Africa. The internet use has doubled in Africa over the last 9 months' time. This is 95% of all digital wallets used worldwide are used in Africa. If we skip checks in banks, they are skipping banks in banking. Over 90% of all remote digital diagnostics is carried out in Africa. And the reason is very simple. They have a need and a hunger, and they have now devices in their hands. Governments are not there yet. People are, and services are following. Governments are following. In terms of dynamics, those are very interesting region. In terms of conceptual thinking, Caribbean is very interesting region. Very small countries. Some countries with a number of inhabitants and residents less than 50,000 people. So how can you build up an e-government with a society of 50,000 people? Starting from border guards, issuing passports, document, tax departments. No, you can't is the answer. But you can collaborate. So you can share, you can build a cross-border e-governance to share the infrastructure. And they have some very good examples on cross-border collaboration beyond the traditional supremacy of the national state. They are giving away bits and parts of the kind of national sovereignty in a traditional sense, but they gain back a lot. So very interesting approaches in Caribbean. And when we are looking to how good is, it's still predominantly small countries can achieve more and faster. And when we are looking what are the slowest in terms of dynamics, it's certainly an old Europe, which is the slowest, the kind of mainland EU 15 core, which is the slowest moving beast right now. And there is no hunger, there is no need, there is a lot of rhetorics. But on the radar screen of politicians, digital issues blink very rarely. And we can see it's issues about migration. It's really a structural economic struggling in Europe. It's issues about composition of society and political battle and openness versus chauvinism and nationalist approaches in European countries. So there are so many things in the radar screen on the politicians which take the attention. And that is not the digital which is coming. So we have a digital coalition, as you might know, worldwide. Estonia is part and one of the leading parts of the D5, now D6 already, and digital coalition on a global level. We have also earlier our coalition was UK, Nordic, Baltic. Now it's only Nordic, Baltic after Brexit. So we have a coalition, we have like-minded countries also in Europe, but we are certainly not the center of gravity in Europe to say what is a digital agenda and how important the digital agenda is. And now I think it's 3:30 and you have a time for digestion of the of the rapid information flow I was giving to you. Was there anything new also for you heard today?
Yes.
What do you, anything you would like to reflect back? What is something I did not know that?
I think it's interesting to look back. I was one of those kids that went into the tents during the program, and how much it has impacted me as well, because I didn't have a computer when I was very, very young. But you mentioned that you don't want to look in the past as much, but instead into the future. So where do you think we will stand as e-government in 20 years, from your own perspective?
Well, e-government is no longer, in 20 years' time, e-government is no longer a kind of item of agenda. It's government is certainly invisible, predictive. The services are certainly predictive, and in 20 years' time, I clearly believe that I have a digital assistant who has my authorization to approve some nitty-gritties on behalf of me. And I will be bothered by government or any other service provider only in very rare cases. The topic will be certainly in 20 years' time on other areas, because what we are going to go through right now is structural changes in the employment market, which reshapes society more than in the early 20th century during the industrial period or industrialization and urbanization area. We don't know. We know that technology will take away, not because technology is evil, but because it's pragmatic. Technology will take away almost half of the jobs in employment market, substantively. Not maybe formally, but substantively, half of the jobs will become irrelevant in less than 20 years' time. And we don't know what those people are going to do. Because training or retraining people or motivating people to do something different is a hard task. So the topics will be not related to e-government. This is somewhere already kind of solved issue, but it will be a society, a new technology interaction. I think next elections in Germany, certainly. I was wondering why did not those last elections, but next election certainly will focus on taxation of robots and extra revenue streams. Taxation of the financial capital, of course, will be the topic very clearly. And globally, the welfare society, the models for welfare society, or the fundaments for the welfare society will be re-established over the next 20 years' time.
Yeah. That's a great answer, thank you.
Yeah.
Also a question on the future. How do you see that, how we succeeded in Estonia in sort of focusing on the right things in digital affairs, and how does this focus affect on how we can keep this competitive edge that we have in digital matters?
This is very, very difficult area, because we still want society is a whole, and pensioners want things, and healthcare system wants digital solutions, education wants digital solutions. We have succeeded in some areas, and in a global scale, we lack a motivation to move as boldly as we did 20 years ago. We lack a motivation and willingness to move boldly in the areas like healthcare and education. And one of the arguments could be, if I'm comparing really this to Africa and rhetorics right now, if in Africa majority of an adult or young population has never been physically in contact with living doctor, then a doctor on the screen is compared to not having any doctor, a huge improvement in the quality of service. And they don't understand, people after having a tense session with a doctor online, they don't understand why should people go 100 kilometers away to visit a doctor in a physical premises. What value can that add? And we are stuck to the concept that we need to meet a doctor. We need to get a bed to the hospital. We need to really to go there. Same with education. We believe strongly still, it's not about education system and teachers, but we believe that children should go in the morning to school and stay there to give parents opportunity to go to work or do any other things. And so it's really a late 19th century concepts that still predominate our mental area. So there are areas where we are strong and good. State finances, tax department, financial management, overall interaction between the businesses. Our business digitalization level is relatively low compared to some other countries, and it's low because of the economic structure we have and the capital ownership we have on the market. So if a Swedish company has decided that the Estonian outreach has a certain role to do in subcontracting, there is no point for moving your innovation and digitalization budget to Estonian outreach, which is very, very logic that we are stuck to the plateau where we are right now with economic structure. But the things in field of education and healthcare are not only just the cost centers, very big cost centers, 1/3 of the state budget, come on. We are spending right now in the areas where we could have a lot of savings and lots of efficiency gains and a lot of service improvement, quality improvement. But we don't know why we can't do it right now, and there is no demand on the market. People want old things to work in the same way. So there are some verticals where we don't succeed right now, and they are not related at all to the missing technologies, but rather missing motivation and willingness.
Do you think we can break through? Because if as you mentioned, that the European chains are becoming really static, really slow, that in order to progress further or gain advantage overall internationally, we need to have these opportunities to break through, similarly what is happening in Africa or Central America. So, what could those opportunities be, or what is the groundwork required for to enable these kind of things? Revolution is not the option, right?
Yeah, maybe it's already happening from the grass.
Precisely. This is something what I would like to say. In 1917, revolution took place over weekend. Right now, revolution takes place every day. We just don't notice it. Every day, a small drop, something happens. The history of technology has taught us one thing: we never can predict the next wave of the technology. Nobody predicted internet, nobody predicted smartphone in that shape which we are using, and we don't know what will be the next big thing. But what we can say, that next big thing is already here. We just don't recognize it yet. And Estonian ability so far has been a fast adopter. Yeah, well, open-minded, small. We have no, I would not say critical thinking, but we have rather, society has a predominantly an open and curious mind, predominantly, towards innovations and new things, and we are also a bit religious about things made in Estonia. And even if those things are not inventions, but just using the technology, come on, what kind of innovation is Taxify? No, man, this is just a copy of a business model in a different markets with some different degree of regulatory boldness compared to Uber or some other companies. And we are so proud. We are proud about the Estonian entrepreneurs doing something which sometimes is not even an invention, but this is scaling our, beating up our emotion and our taking away us from the next fall full of suicides because of the chaos and kamos coming in the fall. And now when we are stopping, changing the times between summer and daylight savings and the darker season will be dominant. We need some startup stories more to avoid people from killing themselves. But I agree with, we have had a lot of discussion, and probably you have had a lot of discussion. Is our image, our global image, bigger than we actually are? Then the answer is yes, and the answer is yes because the image is something which, and the brand is not what you say, what you communicate, but brand is something which is received and translated and transferred into a brand in the brain of a recipient of the communication. If they want to hear the story, well, everybody wants to have a Cinderella story, and in a certain area like digital transformation, Estonia has gained a Cinderella story status. And if you put the Disney into Cinderella movie production, you get all kind of extra features which we never did. And if somebody says Estonia is a leading country in digital transformation and e-governance, even if it might be true in some areas, we are not certainly capable of doing everything and in all the areas which e-governance consists of. It's so broad and wide area. We can proudly say we are dynamic and among the top 10 digital transformation countries in the field of e-governance, driven by public administration digital solutions, but certainly we are not the kind of top one. There are a couple of different approaches, kind of Singapore approach, very, very centrally coordinated approach, and there is Estonian approach, which is rather, said, development-driven strategies and very pragmatic choices, not very strongly politically coordinated.